Hi, I'm Sheila Mahoney from LifeSci Hub, here to answer the question, how is an online resource marketplace such as LifeSci Hub all that different from traditional suppliers such as staffing firms, consulting firms, other third parties, and job boards, and so forth? And it boils down to three main differences and one similarity. The first and foremost difference is the fact that it's a different talent pool. These are experts who are biostatisticians, medical writers, regulatory publishers, anything that might be required during clinical development and also manufacturing and supply chain in life sciences R&D. That's drug sponsors, biotech, as well as the vendor ecosystem that serves them. There is a very high demand for temporary expertise because the nature of the work itself is very unpredictable and always will be, because that's just germane to clinical trials. So we have that level of expertise, but the critical difference is that these are folks who are at a point in their expertise in their careers that they've become independent by choice. In fact, we conducted the first ever survey of this talent pool. As far as we know, there's not been another attempt to quantify this talent pool. And what we found was that there is a very strong preference with this level of expertise to, first of all, not go through staffing firms or third parties such as consulting firms. They prefer to go they prefer to go directly to the customers for a variety of reasons. And what we also found was that there's a very strong preference for part-time, short-term gigs. And this really flies in the face of traditional thinking that all employees everywhere want, or all workers, I should say, everywhere want long-term, full-time projects. So this is a talent pool that would not be easily accessible otherwise, and it has a strong thirst for flexibility, engagement flexibility. So the second big difference is the fact that it's an entirely different revenue model. And before we go into the revenue model of the online resource marketplace concept, we need to just review some of the baseline foundation of traditional suppliers, which is predicated on three things. Number one, the drive for long-term full-time engagements. There's usually some sort of guarantee of business with a certain supplier, which locks the sponsor into that supplier or set of suppliers. And then there's also the reliance upon rate cards and the institutional investment in the belief that rate cards are the single and best defense against cost overruns, which we're going to challenge in a minute. But let's first talk about the impact of being incentivized as an entity to supply only long-term full-time engagements. And here's what that looked like. This is a very simplified plot of the law of returns. And what this is saying is that there's a certain point at which offering greater flexibility, engagement flexibility, starts to interrupt a firm's profitability. And in fact, it's a precipitous drop-off. And so, for example, it is very profitable to place somebody full-time for 6 or 8 months at a drug sponsor, regardless of what level of expertise. It is not profitable or manageable on any level for a third party to allow 10 hours a week for 3 months, then a long hiatus for 6 or 9 months, and then 6 weeks full-time at the study closeout. That is something that is not on the menu because they simply cannot operate profitably that way. The implications to that for drug sponsors is that that means that resourcing decisions are being made not necessarily for what's best for the trial and what's best for the project, but what's best for the third party. And so that is something that is completely different with LifeSci Hub. The first thing to mention is that we do not operate on rate cards. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I know that could be like a squeeze of lemon in the eye. But the principle is a competitive market is what determines both the price of the engagement as well as the nature of the engagement, the term, so on and so forth. And how that works is that the hiring manager posts a project, finds the experts that they need immediately or very quickly, and using our algorithm, and then invites various experts to bid on that work. So you have a competitive market that is helping to determine what the price is, and also the level of expertise, as well as the hiring manager determining who is best to meet this particular need for the clinical trial. And the less third parties involved in that equation, the better. And where efficiency starts to break down is when third parties who are not on the front lines of clinical trials start to dictate things like the rate, like the duration of the engagement, and so forth. So LifeSci Hub is able to do this because we are not a staffing firm. We're not an employment firm at all. We're a technology platform. And a good analogy to think about are marketplaces that are commonly used elsewhere, such as Airbnb and Lyft. Just Airbnb is not a landlord company. Lyft is not a taxi company. They are both marketplaces, which the underlying principle is that they connect traditional demand with non-traditional supply. And that's exactly what the LifeSci Hub platform does as well. And like those two platforms, we charge the user, we support the transactions financially. We're the go-between financially between the supply and demand, and we take a percentage of that transaction, and that's how we make money. So we're invested in the software and enabling these connections and self-selections and the market to dictate a lot of the terms. But we don't have a thick operational layer that is getting in the mix and figuring it all out and managing the whole process. It is really entirely based on the marketplace technology. So let's talk about, let's get back to the concept of rate cards. And again, I know that may seem to many viewers, especially from HR and procurement, to be extremely unusual. But here's why. Flexibility on every level is so important to life sciences R&D, more so than any other vertical. And that's because the potential damage of less than stellar resources applied to the late stages of clinical development are tremendous. And as far as I know, I haven't seen this be measured anywhere, but let me just explain. The first issue, and what we call this at LifeSci Hub, are loss multipliers, resource loss multipliers. The first pressure that is brought to bear at late stages of clinical development is the fact that a drug sponsor desperately needs to fail as fast as possible in order to cut off investment in a drug product that is not going to make it to market. And because so much money is at stake, it's not okay to simply finish a clinical trial. What has to be done as soon as possible is obtaining the data, ensuring the data quality, and understanding what that data means. And the only way a drug sponsor can do that is by having excellent resources on the front lines of all those things. The second thing to think about, the second loss multiplier there with respect to risks associated with resource quality, and that is the fact that every day that a drug is not approved can cost a drug sponsor an average of $3 million. And the most painful thing is the idea that there's usually a very finite amount of time that a drug sponsor can recoup its investment in that drug. And that's because of potential patent expiration. And those types of things, hopefully it could add some perspective to being so committed to the rate card is the only way of saving money on a clinical trial. We feel that better quality, especially if you can obtain it for shorter chunks, more granular chunks of work, the principle that you really do get what you pay for. There is a gig economy technologist and investor who's very well known. His name is Jeff Leventhal. He was the driving force behind WorkMarket, which is a very well-known freelancer management system. Also other gig economy technology platforms such as OnForce and his current venture is called WorkRails. Jeff is a very strong supporter of LifeSci Hub and has coined the term precise procurement. And that's really, in a nutshell, a major difference of the online resource marketplace technology concept, is that it allows a sponsor to utilize the exact skill set it needs at the right time for the exact duration that it needs for the right price. And so precise procurement is a short way of talking about the innovation. And that brings us to what is similar about the online resource marketplace, and that is that it addresses all of the HR compliance that you would normally get from a supplier. So in that granular example that I gave, 5 or 10 hours a week, and then, a long hiatus, so on and so forth, in order for a drug sponsor to engage an independent expert like that would be a mountain of paperwork and difficulty. And that is the number one business administration innovation that LifeSci Hub provides, is that it's a single master services agreement with LifeSci Hub, and then LifeSci Hub holds the agreements with all the independent experts while allowing them to maintain their independence. We address HR compliance, such as worker classification risk. We vet these folks very thoroughly, both in terms of ensuring that their skill set is what they say it is, as well as the 20 criteria that the IRS has listed as proving whether or not somebody is really truly independent. So we address worker classification risk very seriously. We do background checks, drug testing if it's required. We check professional liability. So it's all of these ways of putting this new talent pool in program. So if you have any questions, please reach out. We very much look forward to working with you. Thanks very much.